yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Charles Bishop is out on assignment, but we got Professor Drew in the building. Clinical Professor Drew, as he is doing all the hard wiring and all the work in the production on the backside. And I got none other than Mike Washington. I like the vest you got on there, Professor Washington.
Oh, appreciate it. Appreciate it.
How you doing today?
Oh, I'm good, man. We're winding down this to this new year, man. Lots of stuff.
Yeah, it's quickly getting down. Let's see if 2022 gives us the same type of excitement as 2021, or do we fare a little better in terms of COVID-19? I hope that continues to get better. But with that said, let me say welcome to episode 225 of Inside the HBCU Sports Live radio show and podcast. The show is covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, institutions large and small. From the NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, with Mike Washington, my co-host Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We are filming from our home studios and sending a signal live, K-Sway Short 30 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas, as we have Drew doing his thing across the U.S. as well. With that being said, let me start it off with this. Again, happy holidays. Happy Kwanzaa. This is day 5, the 5th day. We light the candle representing the principle of Nia, as you know, or purpose, as we like to better say. It encourages us to look within, not only to set personal goals, but also to choose goals that benefit our community. We believe in the financial strength and critical to build a successful future for Black in the community. This is One United that I got this from. Certainly wanted to provide that out there. Lit the candle earlier today with my son Deuce, as we've added that to our bonding ritual along with faith. So really beautiful thing as he gets into it and understands this beautiful thing there. With that being said, let me go to you, Mike, and say, hey, how's your day going?
Oh, day's going great, man. Just knocking out a few odds and ends as we wind this year of our Lord 2021 down, just reflecting on what's happened, hoping that we'll see some improvements in a lot of areas. See if we, I think we're a little bit smarter, but, I don't think we're over that hurdle just yet. So, lots of news coming about on the recruiting front, on the sports side. You'll see schools maneuvering kind of the arms race, as my colleague CB would talk about. The arms race continues to heat up as schools jockey themselves to get top talent. So lots of things still happening. And then you have changes, coaching changes that are happening in different spots, and probably some that will probably come on. So lots to talk about, lots to think about. So
yeah, we're gonna do a little fun. After our first commercial break, we'll get into our top 10 countdown for HBCU sports events of 2021. So I'm interested in that. I even snuck back to 2001, but it'll actually be the countdown for 2021, as you imagine this year. So before I go to Drew and ask him what's going on, let me say today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. As I said, this is the top 10 list. We compile it, but I'd be a little remiss if I didn't get a little bit of this shout out in here. As we say, this is one of the sayings that I really appreciate. I only debate my equals, all others I teach. Dr. Henry Clark.
How ironic, spoken by professor there.
Yeah. So, I just had to put that on there. As we ended the year, I thought that would be a good way to pay a little homage. Kwanzaa, and you putting it all together, the lecturers, people debate all this kind of stuff. That's good. That's fine. But, I don't debate here. We just going to teach. This is the lab. That's what we do. Now, we expect you to get in here and say what your thoughts are. So let me shout out, give some of these people some love. I got brother Leon Gilmore Jr. Brother Lee is in the house. LaShawn Harris, sister LaShawn Harris is in here. Chuck Hunt, Willie Alex Hine, as always. Ricky Burton in for the weekly show. I see you, Michael Ford. Good evening to all. Thomas Edison Maddox is in here. JSU still celebrating that BCSN championship, no doubt, I'm sure. Reggie Walston, as they should. Dwight Moore, I see it. He said, nice shirt. Lee liked the shirt. Lee liked the shirt. I'm just saying it. Before I get through this, and we'll say it again at the end of the show, have a safe and happy new year. With that being said, let me get to Professor Drew, AD Drew, for those that don't know, of Sports Wrap, BCSN. Half of the team, Brian and AD, they did a nice multi-hour show, over 3.5 hours of in-depth content of 2021. They went from month to month and really broke it down. And then at the end, it was a true marathon. Then at the end, they broke down their top 10. But with that being said, before we get too far into that, so check that out. It is taped up there. You can go to YouTube, my BCSN, check that in. With that, AD, what are your thoughts of the day?
As I begin hour 4 of my podcasting day, only planned on 2 hours, but we had so much content, we just couldn't stop. And if we thinking about the year 2022, we look back on 2021. First of all, happy to be here because Back at the beginning of this year, a lot of us didn't know if we were going to make it through this COVID thing. So those of us who have survived COVID, we need to knock on wood and be happy that we are here. I had a bout with COVID. I don't know if you guys had a bout with COVID. Luckily, I was vaccinated, so I did not get it as bad as some people who paid the ultimate price for getting COVID. But I want to say, we're going into the year 2022. Deuces. And I want to say a double deuce to COVID in 2022. That's all I want to get out for right now, Doc. Let's get rid of this doggone thing so we can get back to 2019 levels. Double deuces to 22.
We don't run out of the Greek alphabet for him. So,
hey, I said this earlier. I'm gonna say it again. We as Black people, we love our Greeks, but I can't stand this Greek right here.
Yeah,
that COVID and all his variants and all those Greek letters behind his name.
You ain't lying. Yeah, it's a little bit of everything there. I did want to play one thing back, and throughout the show, we might throw this in the last 15 minutes as well. You all might have yours, but I wanted to ask this question. This whole year was fascinating because we got spring football. So we had this long football season that included the fall. So we had multiple champions this year. In terms of really getting into football and lathering up in different ways. As you know, Alcorn decided to opt out of the spring. And based on bylaws with the SWAC, they end up losing some home games. One of those home games was to Southern. Well, they'll be traveling back to Southern next year because that was really the home game. That was really the schedule rotating. This year, the game in the fall was supposed to be in Alcorn. It was in Baton Rouge. As you know, Baton Rouge won that game on a field goal at the end of the game, which, as things played out, gave Alcorn 2 losses instead of just the 1 loss.
Yep.
If they're at home, do they lose that game, first of all? And if they don't lose that game, they only have the 1 loss to Bethune-Cookman, and they beat Prairie View head-to-head. As history may have rewritten things, not only they have fought Alabama A&M in the spring for a championship, they could have been fighting Jackson State back-to-back games for a championship this year. Interesting how history plays out, different ways and decisions you make, how if you had the fortitude to walk forward, how things may play out. We'll never know. And it's in the history books now that obviously Southern wins on a walk-off, the kick that was heard around the SWAC, and eventually was the difference in terms of the one-game lead that Prairie View had that had them playing in the championship game. Fascinating in so many different ways. So any thoughts on that, Mike? How that decision of not playing in the spring could have major impact of what happened on 2020. I just like to do that sometimes as we look at one event or something like that in a year and how it may change it. Any thoughts in terms of how they may have played out differently?
No, that's quite an interesting point, because if that data point changes, you basically have a new tangent line going.
Yeah, because then
I
play
fail
the Valley
calculus.
game.
Please use a word that I understand.
Exactly.
You have this
you got to play back. Does Prairie View play any differently in terms of even going into Alcorn in terms of that game? Do they play it any differently? Do they play Valley any differently? Because they know the data points are different. So, there's so many different things that start to change when you go back to the future, as they say. Before we go to this break, let me get your thoughts on that, Professor Drew.
Well, you brought out my point. I was like, does Alabama A&M win the spring championship? That's the first question you need to ask, because everybody forgets. How soon we forget? Alcorn was in the East. Alcorn owned A&M in the East. So does A&M win the East? Then remember, A&M only won 3 games in the SWAC. And number 4 was the forfeit to Alcorn.
Yep.
So does that change who Pine Bluff played in the fall? I mean, in the spring championship. And I don't know who Alcorn would have played in the West, but Pine Bluff may not have won the West based upon who Alcorn was supposed to play in the spring. That's number one. And number two, yes, I think it would have changed it, because 6 road games in the SWAC. Are you serious? If Alcorn would have won the West this year, we talk about Jackson State, but the story would have been Alcorn with them 6 road games. As much as you talk about Jackson State, that would have been the story of the year.
Yeah. So it changes everything, even possibly your top 10 list. Think that about that. You talking about a nice tease. Let me get this out of here. Dr. Roderick Holmes says, this is a math professor, Texas Southern University. He said it's actually a secant line. I like that. So this is Dr. Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington Bishop. Sitting in for Charles Bishop is none other than Professor Drew. With that, we'll be right back after this break, and we're going to get into the top 10 list and get your thoughts of what we do with our first 10, and we'll give you some honorable mentions as we back into our top 5. Top 5 at the second half of the show. But let's take this quick break. We'll be right back with you. Stick with us.
For 200 years, Montgomery, Alabama has been making history by people who had the courage to stand up for change. Today, this riverfront city has been reborn, embracing the past and looking forward to the future. From the National Memorial for Peace and Justice to the stage of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, this is where history was and is made. We are proud to call Montgomery home, and together, we can be the change.
Let's get back to strolling instead of scrolling. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision for yourself and for your family.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports
Tell everybody
Network.
they can follow their dreams.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Charles Bishop is out on assignment, so we have none other than Professor Drew. I know we talk about sport management, and that's my forte, if you would, in terms of everything I like to do, the business of sports. But this was funny. Dr. Holmes, you'll appreciate this. During the break, you had Mike breaking down the difference between the tangent and the secant. So, I mean, this is what happens when you have chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, mathematicians, economists, economic majors. Even Charles will be here with his business physics background. Boy, I tell you, man, just a bunch of nerds. I love it. In the building, guys. Yes, we're being silly and having fun. We see, hopefully we can take this into 2022 with all things going around. Bless you all. I hope you all are enjoying everything that is due to you. And let's continue to move forward. With that, let's get into this countdown. Dr. Ville's 2021 Top 10 HBCU sports event. Only reason we call it Dr. Ville's name of the show, but everybody can pile in and talk about what this looks like. So I want to see what your thoughts is. Dr. Roger Holmes says he loves it. Man, these folks here. G. Boom Holly is in the house. Happy New Year's Eve, as he puts that on there. Michael Ford says A&M accounts that spring championship. Hashtag A&M along. Hashtag maroon and white. No doubt, Michael Ford, we're not saying you shouldn't count. We believe that you counted. We were just having a little fun to talk about how things could have changed in this year. But no, it's in the record books. That's a Black College, not only SWAC championship, national championship. We got it on the books, and it is in my record books in terms of Dr. Ville's list of championships that goes back to 2002. So you're written in the books, as they say. So don't worry about that. We're not talking about taking it back. You earned that and you held that. Fred Whitter's in the building. Fred Whitter, Winston-Salem State HBCU Heritage Center. Thanks for the great year, guys. Continue the blessings going into the new year. Keep telling the HBCU story. Be equals blessed. No doubt about it. We thank you. You continue to do the great work you're doing, and we'll get it in there. Thomas says, Maddox, no one really counts down the spring championship. Don't say that, man. That's
man.
You say all these engineers.
Ask somebody on the hill.
Yeah, it always has to be somebody that didn't get the championship. Because if they got the championship, they will want everybody to talk about Cavil. Easy to say that when you didn't win it. Average rate of change or instantaneous rate of change. Oh, now he getting ugly. We're gonna lose everybody. We keep this up. With that being said, honorable mentions. Honorable mention 2. Let's start with that. Honorable mention 2. Sherry's Not Dead women's basketball center stage. JSU women's basketball wins SWAC championship over Alabama State. 1-2 matchup all year long. Split during the regular season. Came down to 2 great teams that deserved to be in the championship, and it was a thriller all the way down to the end. Plays going back and forth, made shots, tough shots, turnovers, steals, great plays, and Jackson State gets it done. I had to partner this with the MEAC championship. Very few times do we get both of them in here. We had North Carolina A&T Aggies women's basketball as they defeat over Howard. They leave the conference winning a championship. This is after the men was disqualified for somebody testing positive for COVID, or at least they thought. You know, that's a whole different story how that ended up going back, or whether it was actually a false positive test, which would have been crazy when you think about it. But the Lady Aggies got it done. Tough one there. Last shots. Things went in, free throws, all those big plays in that matchup. It was fascinating. That is the honorable mention. That's how tough it is to make the top 10. The other honorable mention was Albany State's Golden Rams ascension. Albany State football runs the table in the SIC championship, gets it done, finally beats Miles, gets over that hurdle. And they have the unique trip there. They lose a teammate, but in their second to last game, big game they have a death of a teammate. We all talked about here, Adonis Butler. Rest in peace to him. They scored 57 points in that regular season contest, getting a late touchdown to make sure they could put up the 57. And in honoring him, they take a kneel on the extra point so they can make sure they preserve the 57 points. They get another shutout in terms of what they were doing all season. And I think Albany State's season would have been even bigger, except for you had the Division II foe Bowie State which will be in the top 10. I won't tell you where they are in terms of their run. It would have been fascinating if we take another historical step of how things would be different. Albany gets a different matchup in the first round. You saw the upset. If they get the upset, then they face Bowie State in the semifinals or whatever, get into the quarterfinals, how that would have been interesting to see that matchup and who would have got it done. That was not to be the story. Bowie State wins 2 games in the NCAA tournament before they get to the quarterfinals and lose to the team that actually played for the championship and previously won it the year before. So fascinating when you talk about those. Let's park it right here. These didn't make the top 10. Any thoughts? Do you think one of these should have been in the top 10? I know you haven't seen the top 10 for everybody else, but as you start to hear those top 10s, are you going to argue if one of these should have been in there? As we get to it and go down the list, you can tell me which one you're going to pull out at a later point where you're going to say one of these 2 should have been in there. I'm going to start with you, Professor Drew. You think one of these 2 should be in the top 10?
It's kind of tough, earlier today, we kind of paired Albany State and Bowie State together because just that Division II run that we had. I don't know if people realize we had 4 teams in the top 10 at one point in time this season, with a 15 just outside of the top 10 in Super Region 2. So if you pair all of that together, Division II football itself, then I could move that entire, as Mike says, that entire data point into the top 10. But as a singular event, no, I think Albany State is right about where it should be.
Mike, I asked you, do you like these as honorable mentions? Do you go in a different direction? Something sticks out to you about these things right here?
No, I do agree with my compadre there, Mr. Drew, Senior Drew, on the Albany State. If you pair them with Bowie State, then that's a whole different data point. You can make an argument for that. But by itself, I agree with where it's at. I think in my top 10, I actually had the JSU's basketball squad somewhere in the top 10. You could make, an argument. That was a terrific season. If Alabama State is in the West, that's really your championship during the regular season. So they both had tremendous seasons. So Tamika Reed, I believe this was our first championship.
Yes.
So I think they just had a phenomenal season. You could make kind of the argument. I think I had them somewhere. I can't remember. I'm talking about maybe at 8 and 9 on my list that I submitted to you. But that's the other one you can make an argument. But I think it's fine where it's at. I think you have it at number 11. So that's the only one I can say you can make kind of an argument just because of that phenomenal SWAC women's basketball run and championship.
With that, let's get into the top 10, the first 5 on our list. Let's go with number 10. Conference churning. I love to talk about conference churning, and conference churning continues. So I looked at this in terms of all the conference. Obviously, the biggest one out there is the fact that SWAC starts fall 21 season as a 12-member league with the expansion of Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman coming into the league. I thought that was fascinating. But you also had the MEAC churning with teams leaving outside of the MEAC, outside of FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. One that actually started, if you would, in terms of 2021. Not saying that we're going back when Hampton left, but yeah, North Carolina A&T as they begin their Big South Conference membership as they join former fellow members in MEAC Hampton over there in the Big South. But you also have some Division II changes. You have Edward Waters University as they move from a college, as they were making this turn, separate thing, but they moved from Edward Waters College to Edward Waters University. And you have Allen University as they accept invitations to join the SIAC in terms of that process. Obviously, Edward Waters is transitioning in, so they had that process, as well as Allen as they were moving from the NAIA. So that's going to be fascinating when you look at it. You also have the same thing taking place in Texas, HBCU program moving to university status when you talk about Jarvis Christian College moving to Jarvis Christian University. So fascinating that you're starting to see these universities, HBCUs, not only get some of the due diligence they have in that process, but in general, more specifically to athletics, but also doing it from an academic perspective. So that's number 10. Let me go to 9 before I ask you to chop it up and get some thoughts on that. Go to number 9, if you would. Number 9, we're going to look at the HBCU coaching changes. Eddie George is hired in the spring of 2021. That seems so long ago after the season, you may have forgot that it just happened. Yes, it happened this year, 2021. Dawson Oldhams leaves Southern for Norfolk State. We see how eventually that trickles down. But that was a move when Scott left and took a assistant job at an FBS program. He leaves that program open. They end up getting Dawson, and the rest is history. As Eric Dooley leaves Prairie View for Southern University, still looking for a coach over there at Prairie View, as the FCS HBCU program is the only one looking for a coach at this time. Looks like it will run in 2022 before a coach is hired there. You have Hugh Jackson that leaves Tennessee State as the offensive coordinator, and he takes the head job at Grambling State. Cedric Thornton quietly leaves Alcorn as the defensive coordinator for the defensive position at Grambling, joining Coach Hughes. I think that was quietly one that might have got left in the mix, but it's part of those big-time coaching changes. Coach Reginald Ruffin leaves Miles College AD head coach for the AD head coaching job at Tuskegee. A couple of more out there, but those are the ones I thought were big in terms of that, because now Miles is vacant, and I'm hearing some intriguing names there. I'll leave that as a tease and let you know what I find out when it's time to put that information out there. But it could be a big name that's heading over to Miles College. Between 9 and 10, do you flip any of those? Do you think one of them shouldn't be in the top 10? Starting with you, Mike, or do you like my 9 and 10 at this point in terms of big time moves this year?
No, Doc, I actually got to give you the thumbs up. I like the way you did the sub data points. Your 10 was actually my 10 with the conference churning. And for this reason, I don't recall the last time we went into a football season, either spring or fall, where we had this much conversation, this much debate about what could be, what possibly may happen. I mean, take us back early, even the fall of 2020, we were, here, this coach may be here, then prime time starts. Then we have Eddie George. Then we had Dawson Odom in all of his years at Southern. And where's he going to go? He ends up at Norfolk State. I've never heard this much conversation and debate, or at least it's been a while, about all of the coaching moves and the churning that occurred over the, I'd say maybe a 6 to 8 month period of time. So it should be on here. I like the way you sub-bulleted out. It's a bunch of sub data points. So you got a whole formula up in here. So I like that. I wouldn't move it. I wouldn't touch it. So leave it as is. It is as advertised.
Thank you, Professor Washington. Professor A.D. Drew, let me ask you from this perspective. What was the biggest coaching move that you saw in 2021, in your opinion? Yeah, it's nice when we get to take all these subs, but I'm going to put you on the spot. And it's your answer, so it's not wrong. But which one was the biggest hire in terms of 2021 and why?
Well, I can't get the answer wrong, but I will say you wrong for that, for asking me that. Ooh, the biggest coaching hire in 2021. Wow. Well, on a personal level, obviously, I have to go with Reginald Ruffin coming from Miles to Tuskegee, because not only does Tuskegee get a quality coach and athletic director, I don't want to hear about them combining the jobs. That's a different discussion for a different day. We don't have time for that discussion on this show. But it changed the power in the SIAC West, in addition to giving Tuskegee a quality coach, because you took from who has been the perennial power for the last 5 years and brought him back to the traditional power in Tuskegee. But overall, I've almost got to go with Dooley going from Prairie View to Southern for those same reasons. You shifted the power in the West by taking, as they say, the head off the snake. I'm sorry, there's no pun intended with me being a rattler, but you took the head off the snake and shipped them over there to Southern. So I think that's the thing. 16 openings, 16 coaching changes in 2021, Dr. Cavil. 5 still open, 1 on the FCS level, 4 on the Division II level, Savannah State, Miles, Johnson C, and St. Aug, I believe, are the 4 that still remain open. So
fascinating.
Last thing, I dropped number 10 on our list, and I moved the Albany State into that spot thus far.
Okay, I like it. Good way to mix it up. Let's get on to it. Let's get to 8. We're counting down. 8 and 7. We'll talk about that. Diamond thrillers for Southern and Norfolk. Somebody forgot about the Norfolk. A lot of folks says baseball is big in the SWAC, so it made my top 10, but I did it as a combo because one of the games was probably the best game played that nobody saw, which was sad when we have all the streaming platform we got. But you had the dramatic 9th inning, 3 went 24-0 in terms of conference play, made it through the gauntlet of the tournament, had their rival on the rope, or at least you thought, and end up losing 7-6. 2021 SWAC baseball tournament was a thriller. Even the home run itself was to some degree controversial because they had to do the replay. I think they personally got it right. For those that do not remember, the right fielder went to the fence, and it happened the ball was going over right where the door that goes into the pitcher's batting box, pitcher's backup spot, if you would, in terms of where they are. He hits the door where they warming up, and it doors open, and at first it looks like he catches the ball, and then it falls out. So you're trying to figure out, as he comes out, does he have the ball? Then you see it on instant play, it's down on the ball, and you realize actually that the ball travels just over his glove as they slowed it down and played it several times. So obviously they come back after reviewing it. First review. This is the first SWAC championship game that they do of review and have the cameras. People don't realize that there was actually a debate between then Assistant Commissioner Dr. Jason Cavil about whether they should go ahead and have the replay available. Thankfully, they did, because you can only imagine what would happen if they didn't. Now, Dr. Jason Cavil is the VP of Athletics, athletic director, if you would, over there at Alabama State, and they get the call right. But let me get into the other game that nobody saw. This game went into 11th innings. And guess what? It was a 7-6 game as well, with Norfolk State 25-6 over North Carolina Central 27-20. The Eagles actually ended up closing out the program. They were seeking their first championship, made it all the way to the championship game, had a great season, and it looked like everything was going to be about that. And there was going to be actually a World Series game for the major division between these two teams. Everything didn't work out like that, and so that didn't take place in terms of these upsets or some other reasons, if you would. But ultimately, Norfolk State wins their first MEAC baseball championship instead of North Carolina Central, and they do it in a thorough way. Tell me that this one shouldn't be number 8. Let me go to 7 before I get your thoughts on that. Hopefully I did that well. You have the round ball success. So we're going to pit a little bit basketball and baseball. You get Texas Southern Tigers, Norfolk State Spartans. They go through this gauntlet of a season trying to deal with COVID, as you have all these different cancellations. Subtext to this is you have Prairie View and Jackson State actually go undefeated. Prairie View gets the number 1 seed. They play a couple of more games. But you have Texas Southern that's seeded 3rd in the tournament. They go to the tournament. They get Jackson State first. They go to overtime, if you would. A big shot by the point guard Withers to send it to overtime. Then a big shot to win it in overtime. Texas Southern gets over the hurdle of Jackson State, gets into the championship game. Second time in 3 years, really 2 times in a row that you have Prairie View and Texas Southern face up for a championship game. Last time was Prairie View that got it done. This time, Texas Southern gets it done, and they walk down Prairie View, unlike the first one, which was a classic matchup. They went to the buzzer. The big story is Norfolk State coach gets it done for his first time as he's been an assistant along the way that played in the got a championship done as assistant, but now he gets it done as the head coach, wins the Northern Division. gets a big win over Morgan State that actually defeated them late in the season, gives a little payback for that. But they both go to the open rounds of the tournament and they get big wins. First time in the history that both MEAC and SWAC in the same tournament get wins. First time in a while that you've seen them have various wins. In addition, the start of 21 basketball, you get Texas Southern that gets a major upset of number 20 Florida. So I put all that together in terms of big play basketball from the SWAC and the MEAC from that perspective, Division Ones that got a lot of limelight. So 7 and 8. Let me go to you, Professor Drew. Let me start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about number 7 and 8 in terms of top 10?
Ooh, that's kind of tough. I mean, those are some good ones, Doc. I'm gonna start with basketball first. You failed to mention that Norfolk already has 9 victories. We're not used to seeing HBCU teams with 9 wins until the month of February, Doc. And they've got 9 victories going into 2022.
Yeah, I like that. Great one.
Because of the schedules that they had to play.
But if it wasn't for some of the cancellations, they probably would have got 10 wins.
Yeah, they would have got double digits. Yeah, they definitely would have had double digits if it were not for COVID.
They would have got one more. I gotta believe. So great point. I'm glad you added that in. While they didn't have the fact that they got to 9 division with 7 of them, 8 of them Division 1 wins as well.
Yes. So they should be looking pretty come tournament selection time. Hopefully they'll even be able to get at large if they don't win the conference. But the big story, Doc, 2 pitchers changed the face of HBCU baseball. One on the East Coast, one in the Midwest. 2 pitchers. That's all it was. Two pitchers. One in the MEAC, one in the SWAC, and we have a totally different baseball. So I think that's the bigger, me, that's the bigger story. 2 pitchers.
I love it. Mike, basketball or baseball? 7 and 8. What do you think?
Let me start with basketball. Let me start with baseball. Man, I don't even know where to start. First of all, I guess let me start with baseball. Let's history lesson. Jackson State was what? 24-0, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're leading the league in batting average. I think it was 330. Leading the league in pitching, hands down, with a little over 4.3 ERA, team ERA. Leading the league all year in team fielding. Leading the league in less error. You get my point?
Yep. I get it.
They go into the tournament, and as Drew would say, maybe a couple of pitches, a controversial call, and they lose to Southern. Southern, at best, was 4th in the SWAC all year. And they come in and play that tournament competitively. Their pitching ERA jumped by an order of magnitude of 2, which is big in baseball statistically. So I think big. I didn't get a chance to see every game, but that was huge. So I think it should stay. If you look at just a statistic, if you looked at Vegas, they had Jackson State winning hands down. So Southern
sounds like a familiar story.
Yeah, hands down. I was looking at the number. I was like, Jackson State's got this. They got pitchers. I think they had 4 of the top 7 pitchers in the SWAC, which is when you go into the playoff, you have to have arms. You didn't say that about Southern, but somehow, some way, all right, I get it. Controversial call and all of that good stuff. They found a way to pull it up. I thought that was huge. And then in basketball, you had PV winning the regular season, for the 2nd, 3rd year in a row, and they get into the championship, and here they is. It's another PV TSU matchup, and TSU just wanted it more. They grinded, and if you saw that game, they just wanted it more. So I leave them where they are in order. I keep the baseball ahead personally, just due to the sheer magnitude of what it took for Southern to overcome all of the challenges they had with a very powerful Jackson State team going in. Their bats were phenomenal. Their slugging percentage, I don't think in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a team that has a higher slugging percentage than Jackson State had. So.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Let me jump in here and go to number 6. Aggie's great track team on earth, as they like to say, the greatest homecoming on earth. Now they can say that they had the greatest team on earth, a track team, men's and women on earth, baby. North Carolina A&T State men's and women's track international stage and international stage with NCAA championship in terms of individual relays. Also in terms of their Olympic performance, the number of folks they had participating in the Olympics, I think was big, and a lot of people may have kind of forgot that. But it all came right around the same time. When you just get enough of celebrating what they did at the NCAA tournament, all of a sudden you hear about all of the different runners being able to run in the Olympics for their country. That was significant and huge in terms of what took place there. At number 5, I'm going to sneak that in so we can save the top 4, if you would. Bowie State, and all we do is win. All they do is win. Bowie State Bulldogs win their 3rd consecutive CIAA and HBCU mid-major championship, winning 12 straight games, and they do this one in fine fashion as they make an unprecedented run for the program to the quarterfinals in the NCAA Division II football playoffs. And that's one reason I kind of separated from Albany State, is just how dominant they have been over a period of time, and they encapsulated in the perfect way this year in terms of making to the quarterfinals. And because of how things played out, that they even earned some national championships in terms of the Black College Championship, as there were 4 teams essentially to fight for the championship this year. So I thought that was big when you talk about that. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and get your thoughts on some of that as we get into 4 and 3 and make sure that we close that perfectly. Stick with us. We'll be right back after the break. We gave you the bottom 6, I should say. Come back as we give you the top 4.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes, even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. Number 15?
Never not working!
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Head & Shoulders scalp shield, never not working.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Before I get your thoughts on this, as Charles is out on assignment, so we have Professor A.D. Drew in and Professor Washington. Before I get your thoughts on 6-5, let me jump in there with number 4. Let me give you number 4 and get all your thoughts on this. Alabama A&M overcomes COVID-19. This is the thing that I thought was important. It's not that they just won spring championship. I don't think people appreciated what they were overcoming to do COVID-19. We had folks that literally were shut in. They wouldn't leave their house at the time. And you had all these different things that you were trying to do to be able to coalesce your team in such a way that you kept them from having to not postpone a game, if you would, because they had COVID-19. You dealt with all the postponements on the other time when you didn't have to play games, whatever. But then when you got on the field, you got it done and played through it. I think that says a lot. There'll never be another championship for the most part where you have to deal with it from a football perspective, it looks like. But who knows? COVID-19 is doing all these different variants as you talk about in terms of the Greek alphabet. So maybe I need to slow down on it. But I did want to make sure that people really focus on what this team had to overcome in terms of dealing with COVID-19. This championship was won literally in the middle of a world pandemic that some people are now choosing to look at it maybe as an endemic in terms of what's going on because it just has the variations. So in terms of 6-5-4, sticking with you, Mike, what are your thoughts in terms of the breakdown as we get into 6, 5, and 4 on the top 10.
So I had Alabama A&M in their performance in the spring out there. I did tie in COVID. I didn't have them as number 4. My personal opinion, this is not anyone. I think you have to move the performance of North Carolina A&T and their track team up a little. I don't know if you can understate the performance that they did, men's and women.
You see them at least top 5.
Yes, absolutely.
I can see that. I can see that. Great point, mate.
Yeah. So I mean, Dwayne Ross. I mean, Trevor Stewart, Cambria, Taylor White. I mean, you name it. They were setting records in the 4x4, the mile relay, and the 4x1. The 4x4 relay. One of the fastest times twice this year. And they finished overall team statistics, I believe, 2nd or 3rd in the NCAA final. So I think it's been a long time since I said HBCU. I'm competitive, and I knew everyone knows we could do it, but the way that in which they did it convincingly, I mean, I in my opinion, they're in the top 5.
I like it. Good point. Go back in the archives because we have interviews with 6, 5, and 4. We have interviews with the track coach and the top runners in terms of that. Go check we have an interview with Coach Maynard in terms of what he was able to do with Alabama A&M, and we have an interview with Coach Wilson and what he was able to do with the Bowie State Bulldogs. Think about that. We all had those interviews right here on Inside HBCU Sports Lab. 80 Drew, 654. Any problems with any of that?
It's tough. I understand Mike's argument, but it's tough to. You're splitting hairs here, Mike. That's the best way to put it. Bowie State, the best. Last time we seen a performance like Bowie was Tuskegee 2016, and before that was Winston-Salem 2012. So that has to be up there. But have we ever seen a performance like North Carolina A&T's track? I mean, we've seen Alabama State dominate the SWAC on a conference level, but we haven't seen anyone dominate on the national level like A&T did. And just the fact that we were able to play spring football, and you have to really throw the SWAC story into that for spring football. When they canceled the fall season, they were the first ones to come out and say, we will play in the spring. So let's back it up. That becomes part of this story to even give Alabama A&M the opportunity to play in this spring. We rag on Alcorn, but Alcorn made a decision that they felt was appropriate. There were many games that were played, rescheduled, or just outright canceled. And then there was one game in particular that should have never been played, and that's that butt whooping that Southern put on Grambling when they got all their players back the day before the Classic. At the end of the season. So you got to give Alabama A&M all their props for surviving all of that and still coming out on top. 4 games, 5 games, 1 game, I don't care. They handled what was in front of them.
Yep. I can't disagree with that one either.
He says, Drew, you supposed to be the voice of D2. He say all AD, saying all AD. He said you got to talk about some track in terms of that. Much love. Good point, Steve Gaither. We showed this love.
My bad, brother. My bad.
Dr. Holmes said men was 3rd, right. Women's was 4th in the national in terms of NCAA. That was big to talk about that. St. Aug continues the historic that they do in the track. So you certainly could have put all that in there. I'm glad you did that. Let's look at 3 and 2 before we get to number 1. Number 3, South Carolina State football shocks the world. South Carolina State Bulldogs started the season 0-3, then went to 1-4, win 6 out of 7, goes 5-0 in the MEAC. Some close ones there, but they get it done, and then they get their opportunity. And this is what we talk about in life lesson. When you get the opportunity shot, you better make it work, and they sure did, as they defeat the unanimous number 1 HBCU team across various polls that were out there. The FCS National 15th ranked team in many polls with Jackson State, and that was the NCAA official poll, if you would. Jackson State Tigers in that 2021 Cricket Wireless Celebration Bowl. The throw chaos, as some people would talk about in terms of national picture. So I thought that was fascinating. So I want to shout out South Carolina State and making it to the top 3. At number 2, Rattler-mania is what I'm calling this. The SWAC era begins, but they had so many different things as they were stacking up this. Yes, they canceled the spring. Women's no basketball. They did get basketball, and they made a surge in the Southern Division. Couldn't get it done against North Carolina A&T in some close contests. They were undefeated at home until that game against North Carolina A&T, where they looked like they may have tried to get a piece of the Southern Division as they were leaving. Credit to the Aggies on the men's side to get it done. But Florida A&M signs first of its kind apparel deal with LeBron James, the biggest name in basketball that's out there, certainly one of them, if not across the world at this current time. Florida A&M earning an FCS playoff as a large bid as a member of the SWAC that hadn't been done for the SWAC in multiple decades, hadn't been done in the MEAC in a decade as well. Florida A&M's women's volleyball team, first SWAC championship in a 5-set match against Jackson State, where they had defeated each other. FAMU had all these non-conference wins. Jackson State came through the regular season and got it done. Fascinating when you talk about all these different things heading into it is the reason why I say Rattler-mania. SWAC era begins, and let's not throw knowledge in terms of what they were able to do with the attendance at home. Even when you question that first game of not having the attendance out there, attendance was off the chain, multi-million-dollar games at home that they earned in terms of making this switch. So 3-2, let me stick with you, Professor Drew. Any problem with 3-2 on the list?
Yeah, I got a problem. And look, Rattlers, I got my degree. Y'all can't take it back from me. But I really think the number 2 could be bumped out of the top 5, and you could take 5, 4, and 3, and 6, 5, 4, 3, and move them up and drop FAMU to number 6. It was a top 10 story, but I'm not sure. It doesn't outshine what South Carolina State did as far as cause the controversy that, and it's not controversial that they won, but it's controversial as who is the number 1 team in HBCU football. So that's the controversy.
I see that. Yep.
Does not trump the A&T track story. Does not trump Bowie State. So which one am I missing? What was number 4 again? I missed
number 4 was Alabama A&M overcoming COVID-19 to win the spring.
All right, we could split hairs right there. You could go with either one of them at number 5, but those other 3 definitely should move up above this one, in my opinion. And why not par for the course for South Carolina State 2020? You know, we had all other chaos in 2020. Why not have chaos over who's our national champion, as we have 4 of them right now? 4.
Exactly. And why not have controversy?
22, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 national championships. So,
exactly. So
why not?
Why not have controversy right here on who's number 2? I love it, Drew. Perfect segue as I get to Washington, Mike, Professor Washington. What's your thoughts on 3 and 2? Look like you agreeing with Professor Drew there a little bit.
I agree 150%.
Oh man.
I don't good, God bless you all to the Rattlers and your little thing you do right there. But you can do that out the top 5. I think you cannot trump the performance of the North Carolina A&T. I'm sorry. And then South Carolina State, I don't think anybody in the world saw them coming, which they came out of the, not left field. They came from the Sudan. And they started the season 0-3, I'm sorry. And they came out and they did their best impression of Ali. If you saw the Will Smith version of Ali,
the rope-a-dope.
Everybody thought that was supposed to be in the SWAC. They weren't supposed to do anything. They thought it was in, but they got it wrong. So I'm telling you, that one is probably a number 6. You can move 3, 4, 5 all the way up. I actually had the South Carolina State victory over Jackson State, which so many people had crowned. I have that as either 1 or 2.
I love it. This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let's go to number 1. Hold on. Let's take a quick break and we'll bring you back. That's what we call a tease. And we're going to give you number 1. Promise you, stick with us. We'll be right back and we'll give you number 1 and see what your thoughts are on the number 1. sporting event for 2021 amongst Doctorville's top 10. We had the ups and downs, whether somebody should be in top 5. Now we're really going to get the thought to see what you think about the number 1. With that being said, next year is the Eye of the Tiger, so I'm not sure if that gives you much indication. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this break.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. Brian, AD, Roy, all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
Up a first down.
And I'm going to go back to, we talked to our friends, Charles Bishop and Neely. They follow Jackson State football and having dinner with them. I mean, they said this team feels like nobody can score 3 times on them. 3 times. He didn't say if it was 3 field goals, 3 touchdowns. Prairie View has scored twice. Touchdown, field goal. That's how good this defense is. And, whoa. They are as good as advertised. 4th best in all of FCS.
It got to get to the point where whoever we're doing the broadcast that week of the game, they're going to have to sit down with y'all because y'all know us better than everybody. Sure. And y'all know some of the inside stuff that I may not tell them because I don't trust them. But trust us. Okay. Trust y'all.
We appreciate that.
We
trust.
appreciate that, Coach. Much love, baby.
Doctorville's inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Let me get it into you as we do it just like this. We have return of the MAC. No, not return of the MAC, but we have return of Jackson State Tigers. As Charles Bishop would tell you, next year is actually the Chinese year for the Tiger. But it looks like they're a year ahead of schedule. Some will say that no, they're right on schedule because you'll see in 2022. It will be interesting to watch. Jackson State and Coach Prime signs the nation's #1 ranked recruit, Travis Hunter. Big story still going on. You still talk about the fact, the reverberations of what that means. Now you're hearing that they're not necessarily done, so there may be other top recruits out there. 5 stars is what they're looking at. That really has everybody up in the hizzy in some ways. Fascinating stories galore. But then you got to really look at deeper than that. Jackson State Tigers win their first SWAC title since 2007, go undefeated 8-0 in the regular season, including winning the SWAC championship game. So they go 9-0 against SWAC competition. In this new expansion era, 12-member SWAC, so they're the first one to do it. JSU football attendance in the spring and really in the fall was off the charts. Last 3 games they had over 50,000 people in attendance in terms of what they're able to do. Probably would have put 50,000 along with South Carolina State in the Celebration Bowl, but they capped that at just over 48,000. You talk about basketball, we said earlier, you talk about what they did in baseball. We talk about what they did in volleyball. So the entire program is performing at an extremely high level, particularly in 2021. So for that, it is the return of Jackson State Tiger. My #1 storyline in terms of sports events is essentially anything that's dealing with Jackson State Tigers right now is hot and fire grease. With that, I'm going to go back to you, Professor Drew, since you set the world on fire. Let me see if you have any questions on this one in terms of the #1 story for 2021.
No, it's kind of tough. I mean, Jackson State athletics, period. They dominated everything that they played. They competed in everything. If they didn't win, they was in multiple championship games. So yeah, Jackson State athletics is up there. I'm trying to think who could we have said would have been second. And it's tough because you would have had to have played in the spring and in the fall to compete with Jackson State. You know, Alabama A&M had a run at it. Outside of Alabama A&M, I really can't tell you anyone else who may have been able to put a run on Jackson State being the, over as an overall program, the best program in HBCU sports. I'll just leave it right there.
Mike, what are your thoughts on the number one story? Did I get it right?
Yeah, I would have lumped some a lot more into the recruiting, what they've done overall for recruiting.
Throw it in there. I like that.
Yeah, I would have added a lot more in there.
Going back, because you had the top recruiting class, one of the best in the country,
right?
Highest that you've seen since FCS since they recorded it, obviously. So, good point. I'm glad you added that in there, Mike.
Yeah. The other thing is, going back to your point, the only team I could think that mirrors the performance that Jackson State has done athletically, maybe a year or two back, North Carolina A&T, baseball, track and field, football, Celebration Bowl. I think number of victories, that's about as close as you can come with North Carolina. We were saying for a while on this show is rather, man, you want to send your kids to North Carolina A&T because their programs all around were doing really well. That's about as close as you can come, or mirror it. So, for lack of better terms, more or less in certain areas. But I agree. There are no other teams from my perspective that come close to Jackson State. So I think you got this one right. I think it was my number 2, Dr. Cavil, and I had the South Carolina State victory as number 1. But I think you can flip flop. You're splitting data points there, and they have, from my perspective, equal value.
Yeah, I love it. Great points you make there. I think when you talk about A&T, 2019, I think it's without a question. 2020, they started off in a position that was really hot there, but not having football in the fall really hurt them, and not having any of those sports. Obviously, volleyball, they couldn't show up. Then you come to the spring, they don't have any spring football games. So you're talking about a year off where they're outside of the window. And so the track and fields men was high, and that's why you could argue maybe, as you said, they should be top 5. But I think it's hard to put them any further because of the absence. Now, I think the big question coming in for A&T with that is how quick do things go in a different cyclical area? And now that they're in the Big South, that they're a little bit outside of the window, the importance of winning is going to be even more important because they're outside of traditional windows and areas that you cover HBCU programs with the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. Shout out them as an honorable mention in terms of them being able to rebuild after losing 2 teams. I want to shout them out a little bit. And then obviously the SIAC, CIAA, the MEAC, as they were able to tell story, winning the MEAC SWAC Challenge and closing out with the Celebration Bowl has revitalized them in a lot of ways. And then obviously the king of it right now is the SWAC. Go ahead and get your final thoughts in.
You said GCAC. One team that could make an argument on that level would be Xavier of New Orleans. I mean, they won the men and women's basketball. They were competitive in baseball, reaching the finals of the Black College World Series, reaching the NAIA tournament. They won the spring GCAC volleyball championship, then went to the Red River Athletic Conference and won their first volleyball championship in the Red River Athletic Conference.
So they won it. Nice.
If you follow HBCU tennis, you know Xavier's tennis program is dominant. So Xavier on that level could par Jackson State. Obviously, they don't play football, but everything else, they're on par with Jackson State.
Oh, I love it. Great little nugget there. Any final one that you have, Mike, in terms of your final thoughts as you just saw Professor Drew show out there?
No, I think the one that wasn't on my list was I actually had it as an honorable mention. PV's golf team won third SWAC championship back to back. I thought that was an honorable mention there. Quietly getting it done, men's and women's golf. So I had that as I didn't mention that earlier, but I'd be remiss if I didn't. I kind of like AD Drew. I have people throwing pins and building voodoo dolls of me if I didn't mention PV and Sunlight, and that to me is the area where they got to get mentioned.
I think to your point, though, you talk about all sports trophy in terms of overall what teams did. They finished in overall in terms of sports, close 1 in men's, 2 in women's, but overall they got it done. Shout out to Alabama State. I think the question you have with Prairie View in terms of them being higher on the list in terms of a top 10 or even an honorable mention is the fact of not being able to finish their deal in football.
Right.
That would have been huge to get them over the hump. But you're right. In terms of honorable mention, I do think when you look at the totality of that program, there should be a lot of credit going there. It's a great point you put in there. That'll do it for us. I hope everybody enjoys what we were able to get done for Dr. Bill's 2021 Top 10 HBCU Sports Moments, if you would. The big time events for 2021. I hope we have just as exciting 2022. Again, everybody out there, be safe. Enjoy as you close out 2021. And let's get ready for a big 2022 because we're going to continue to bring you the latest and greatest, great interviews, great conversation, great dialogue in the lab for 2022. Check us out as we say thank you for the listeners for making it a great 2021 for us. Hopefully you enjoyed all the things that we're able to do, some of the remote broadcasts in terms of bringing you into our houses literally during COVID-19 in terms of when we were quarantined in so many ways and making things interesting. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. I want to shout out for Professor A.D. Drew for coming in, running the shop, and getting on the front side of the camera, giving us insight in terms of top 10. Does a wonderful job like he always does. Make sure you check out, again, Sports Wrap with Brian and AD. They did a marathon. If you really want to get some great details, big time news, share that with you. As they did on the show, do want to make sure that we acknowledge those that we lost in 2021. They did a great breakdown of those names, so please go and check that out. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. That's DrKenyattCavil. That's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on YouTube. In terms of Facebook, Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. With that, AD.
Deuces, everybody. Peace out. We love you. Course.
Lecture, Mike.
Dismissed. Kumbaya money. Left happy Kwanzaa.
Happy New Year.
Yes,
Remember those
job,
bullets that
job.
go up must come down.
Great job. Way to sneak back in there right on time.